Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are around the globe. And welcome to part two of our webinar series, Leading Through Uncertainty, why Emotional Intelligence is the New Managerial Advantage. My name is Jerry Blenman, Executive Director of the Caribbean Center for Organizational Excellence and host of today's forum. In our first session, we examined the strategic case for emotional intelligence in today's leadership environment. We explored how uncertainty, whether driven by economic shifts, technological disruptions, or the human pressures within organizations, has fundamentally changed how leadership manages change. Yeah. Today, we move from understanding to the next and arguably most important step of doing. We do so mindful of the fact that most leaders are familiar with the term emotional intelligence. Many can explain why it matters. Yet, when the pressure rises during difficult conversations, during performance reviews, when there's conflict within teams or moments of organizational strain, very few leaders apply emotional intelligence deliberately and consistently. This morning's session is consequently designed to shift our focus from theory to disciplined application. From the outset, we wish to emphasize that this conversation is not about becoming nicer. It is about becoming more effective, more intentional in how we show up as leaders, as individuals, more aware of how our emotions actually shape our decisions, more deliberate in how we influence the climate, how we engender trust and performance among teams that we have the honor to manage. Before we move into the main presentation, we want to start with the voice of the room, and we consider you to be the voice of the room, your voice. Ahead of this session, participants in session one were invited to complete a short survey exploring how leaders currently perceive emotional intelligence and its role in management today. The responses provided some really great insights and perhaps a few surprises about how EI is understood and applied across organizations. We're going to have a look at these in a short moment. Following that, we will move directly into our featured presentation with Aayusha Shrestha, who will guide us deeper into what emotional intelligence truly looks like when applied in the real world of leadership. Aayusha, an emotional mastery mentor, and is also director of international programs with Soft Skills AHA in the USA. She is passionate about emotional intelligence, soft skills, and personal and professional transformation. Aayusha is joined this morning by Terence D, business executive with extensive experience in human psychology. And he will be joining particularly towards the end of this conversation and certainly throughout when we respond to questions and dig a bit deeper into this whole matter of the practical application of emotional intelligence. We invite you to feel free to post your questions in the Q&A portal during our conversation this morning. We share with you now details of that thought exercise. And, again, it's really great to have both Aayusha and Terence with us. Terence, Aayusha, you would have a look at the thought exercise, the survey results. Share with us your thoughts while we, prepare to look at that.
Yes, sure. So the answers were predictable, but there were there was some which where, you know, probably it was because the audience got a chance to understand emotional intelligence slightly. I could see that that also influenced the answers. So it made me think that if we had sent this before the session, perhaps the answers would have been slightly different. The response would have been slightly different. So it's interesting to see, you know, because for sure there was some influence. But yes, really looking forward to seeing what the response, you know, like what you think also, Jerry, about the responses.
Well, we've got the responses up online, and we will go through these briefly because we know these are going to be unpacked in some measure throughout the session. But the question
Yes.
of what emotional intelligence primarily is was posed to the respondents, and 5% of them indicated being naturally empathetic and emotionally warm. We also had 11% indicating that it is a soft skill that matters more than HR in executive leadership. But interestingly, 82% of the respondents pointed to the fact that managing that emotional intelligence is primarily
Mm.
managing emotions effectively, both yours and others, to improve outcomes. We then went on
Mm.
to look at this whole matter of in times of uncertainty, you know, whether strong leadership, what strong leadership is mainly about. And 65% of the respondents indicated that, you know, it is about regulating team emotions while maintaining clarity and direction. 24% indicated it was about staying positive and motivating individuals, while 12% indicated that it was about providing direction and making decisive calls. Now, we also beg the question, when a team member reacts emotionally under pressure, what a leader should basically do. 94%, 94% indicated recognize, regulate, and respond in a way that stabilizes performance, while 6% indicated that they should redirect them quickly to focus on results. And this is quite interesting. I know we're going to unpack this some more in our conversation, but this I thought was quite interesting. On the matter of emotional intelligence and impacts, 88%, and we beg the question, emotional intelligence most directly impacts what? And 88% said performance, retention, stress levels, and decision quality. 12% indicated workplace harmony and morale. And this too I found to be quite, you know, interesting, that the bulk of respondents indicated that emotional intelligence was really important for driving performance, retention, stress levels, and decision quality. With regards to self-awareness in leadership and what it means, 88% indicated understanding how your emotional patterns actually shape team culture and performance, while 12% indicated knowing your strengths and actual weaknesses. So again, this matter of self-awareness in leadership and emotional intelligence is a huge area of conversation. Uh, with regards to investing in AI development, 71% indicated strategic performance lever is that it is a strategic performance lever in volatile environments. 24% indicated that is primarily useful for emerging leaders, while 6% indicated that it is helpful but not essential for senior leadership. That was quite interesting as well. So, you know, it is great that 71% of individuals felt that investing in AI development was a strategic performance leader and that it was really important, especially in volatile situations. With respect to the matter of um, individuals' own leadership under uncertainty, and the question that went out was, when I think about my own leadership under uncertainty, I would say, and 64% said that I intentionally regulate my emotional responses to shape team stability. 11% said I rely mostly on experience and decisiveness, while 23% said I haven't consciously thought about my emotional patterns influence outcomes. And that's an interesting response. Almost, 25, almost a quarter of respondents said I haven't consciously thought about my emotional patterns, influence, and outcomes. Now, we should say that there is no right or wrong answer. Remember, this was an exercise. The question was also asked, when you are under pressure and need to make a fast decision, what do you notice first? 64% said the problem that needs solving. 17% said how they were feeling about the situation, and another 17% said what the team expected them to do as leaders. The question was also asked, a team member comes to you frustrated about a project setback. Your instinct is to do what? And look at this, 88% said, acknowledge their frustration first, then problem solve. Acknowledge their frustration first, then problem solve. 5% we're going to jump straight to problem solving, and another 5% said that we were going to reassure them that everything will be fine. We also asked the question, when leading your team through uncertainty, what do you believe your most important role is to be? 70% said to create a space where the team can figure it out together. 17% said project confidence even when you don't have all the answers. 11% said provide clear answers and direction. We also asked, how often do you pause before responding in a tense conversation? 70% said usually. I've trained myself to take a moment. But a quarter of the respondents said sometimes when I remember too. Sometimes when I remember too. Now the question is, what happens between when you don't remember and when you remember? That was so very interesting. And then 5% said, rarely, I trust my instincts and respond quickly. The final questions were, when you think about emotions at work, which statement feels most true to you? 70% said, emotions tell us what matters and what needs attention. 17% said emotions should be acknowledged but not dwelt on. And 11% said emotions are important but can get in the way of productivity. That's interesting. The penultimate question was, in team meetings, you're most aware of what? 70% said who's speaking, who's silent, and the energy in the room. 23% said the quality of the ideas being shared, and 5% said whether we are staying on agenda and making progress. And the final question was, if your team had one sentence to describe your leadership style under pressure, you hope they would say, and 71% said, they stay calm and make us feel safe enough to think clearly. 24% said they are decisive and keep us moving forward. And 6% say they always have a plan. What some interesting, Terence, I mean, what a set of interesting results. Your brief comment
Yes,
before Aisha
yes,
asks,
Jerry.
and
Good morning to everybody, and just delighted to be a part of this webinar as a panelist. My name is Terence D, and I'd like to draw attention to number 13. Uh, Number 13 was where reading the room scored very high, on who's silent and, detecting the energy of the room. Now, that I believe kind of puts the whole idea of emotional intelligence in a nutshell. Because, in an age where spreadsheets can predict markets and can't do anything about predicting moods. And this is where I believe the ability to read the room may be one of the most underrated leadership skills that we have. So before I talk more about this, because I'm so passionate about it, I would love to learn what Aayusha has to share today, as we are all eager to learn from her today. Thank you, Jerry, for
thank you
inviting
so
me.
very much, Terence. Aisha?
Yes. Wonderful. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you.
You're so welcome.
So, firstly, of course, as always, I want to say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you, depending on where you're joining us from. So, today I'm excited to be here for part 2. I've actually been counting days because today I seek to establish the correct understanding of emotional intelligence. Because until and unless you have full clarity about emotional intelligence, you won't be able to correctly implement it in your own workplace. So I will be doing that by first talking about what emotional intelligence is not, because there seems to be a lot of misunderstandings about emotional intelligence. So in a way, today, I will be busting 10 myths on emotional intelligence. And if I have busted any of the myths on emotional intelligence for you, please make sure to include that in the comment, because I'll be really interested to know what myths I busted for you with regard to emotional intelligence. And of course, I will be talking about what emotional intelligence is. I will be sharing the 4 main pillars about emotional intelligence, which will make us understand emotional intelligence all the more. And I will also be correlating emotional intelligence with conscious leadership. Now, we talk about conscious leadership, but I want to establish that a conscious leader can only be a conscious leader if he or she is emotionally intelligent. So that, and after that, I will, of course, be sharing the Monday morning model. Now, as an emotional intelligence educator, my goal is actually to always simplify this topic for everyone. And not just that, to find actionable tools, to share actionable tools that you can start utilizing in your own life immediately. So I'm really excited to share the Monday morning model. So first, let's look at what emotional intelligence is not. So emotional intelligence is not about being nice. Emotional intelligence doesn't mean you never deliver tough feedback or make hard decisions. It means you do those things effectively, with clarity, without cruelty, and in a way that people can actually relate. Next, emotional intelligence is not about suppressing how you feel. It is not about hiding emotions or pretending everything is fine when it's not. It's actually about feeling your emotions fully and choosing how to respond to them strategically. So you actually sit with your emotions, but you don't react. What you try to do instead is you try to understand them. Next, emotional intelligence is not endless empathy. Now, empathy without boundaries leads to burnout. So emotional intelligence actually means understanding what others are feeling without taking on their emotions as your own. Very important to note. It is actually compassion with clarity, not emotional enmeshment. Next, sorry about that. Next, emotional intelligence is not avoiding difficult conversations. So leaders with high emotional intelligence don't shy away from conflict. In fact, it's just the opposite. They lean into it constructively. They address issues early, directly, and with respect. It is those with low emotional intelligence who try to avoid conflict. But those with high emotional intelligence, they engage with conflict because they know that if they don't engage early on, it could turn into a bigger issue. Next, emotional intelligence is not about making everyone happy. You, as a leader, are not here to be liked. You are here to lead. Emotional intelligence means making decisions that serve the team as well as the mission, even when those decisions are unpopular. Emotional intelligence is not a personality trait you either have or you don't have. So it is not something you're born with. It is a learnable skill set, just like public speaking or financial literacy. So you can measure it, train it, and improve it. Emotional intelligence is definitely not about being soft or weak. Some of the toughest, most decisive leaders have the highest emotional intelligence. They are not soft, but what they are is they are strategic. They know when to push and when to pause, when to challenge and when to support. Emotional intelligence is not just for people-focused roles. Even engineers need emotional intelligence. Finance professionals need it. Data analysts need it. Basically, any role that involves working with other humans, which is practically every role. So everyone requires emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is not about reading minds. You don't need to know exactly what someone is feeling at all times. Emotional intelligence is, however, about noticing signals, asking questions, and staying curious rather than making assumptions. And emotional intelligence is definitely not the opposite of logic or intelligence. Now, this is one of the most damaging myths out there. Emotional intelligence and cognitive intelligence actually work together. And think about it. That is why the word intelligence is sitting right next to emotional, isn't it? That is why it's called emotional intelligence. The best decisions integrate both clear thinking informed by emotional data. So it is not feelings over logic, it is feelings and logic working in service of the same goal. So that brings me to, what is emotional intelligence? So emotional intelligence is your ability to first recognize emotions. So emotions take place, first you recognize it, not just in yourself, in others as well. Then you try and understand. Remember, now you're bringing your cognitive thinking. So you try and understand what those emotions are trying to tell you. What is it signaling to you? And then it is about using that information to guide your thinking and behavior in ways that serve your larger goals. Now, again, at the heart, or at its core, there is harmony in emotional intelligence, right? Harmony within yourself and harmony with others. So, harmony within yourself is where what you feel, what you think, so what you feel, what you think, and how you act are in alignment, where you're not constantly in conflict with your own emotions, but you're actually working with them. That is what brings harmony within yourself. But if you're in conflict in terms of how you think and how you act and how you feel, you definitely feel heavy inside. It feels like there is, of course, conflict within you. So harmony with others is where your team feels psychologically safe, where conflict is constructive rather than destructive, and where people can disagree without feeling attacked. Now, we must remember that this isn't about creating a workplace where everyone agrees. It is about creating one where people can think clearly and independently, while simultaneously be able to work collaboratively and navigate uncertainty together, even when things are hard. So that is harmony. It is not the absence of tension, but it is the ability to work through it productively. Next, so what are emotions, right? It's crucial to ask that. What are emotions? So emotions are actually crucial data. This slide, this part, I would want you to please remember. Emotions, what are they? They are crucial data. They are information about what matters, what's at risk, and what needs attention. So don't you think these emotions are important for self-awareness? To know about yourself, don't you think you need to thank your emotions, that you are able to learn so much about yourself through your emotions? But the reason why emotions were maligned, that the reason why it has negative connotation, or it's looked at negatively, is because of the lack of self-regulation. But emotions in itself are crucial data. Think about it. There is an event X that occurs, and there are two people. Both of them react differently to that event X. So what does that say? That says that emotions are a gold mine for self-awareness. And people normally think that emotions are also instructions. This is where we react. This is why emotions are looked at negatively, whereas emotions, as I mentioned, in itself is wonderful. So emotions are data, but they are not instructions. Very important to understand. Today, if you just take a screenshot of this even and try and understand this, you will have already embarked on the journey of becoming emotionally intelligent. So think about it. When there is an emotion, and the moment since you now know better, you now know that emotions are not instructions. So what happens? You definitely disrupt the reaction process, correct? You end up pausing, right? You don't react because now you know emotions are not telling you what to do. So just by doing that, what happens is you are now activating your thinking brain. And that is why the gap between an event and the response, the pause or the gap in between, that is where emotional intelligence resides. So I also want to talk about the old myth versus the new science. Now, with regard to emotions, what we were also taught or what we heard was that emotions live in specific parts of your brain. I'm sure you've heard of amygdala, and maybe you must have also heard that amygdala is actually the emotional center. But now science says that emotions don't come from one single emotional center. Emotions are actually constructed. It is constructed in real time, created through networks across your entire brain, working together, interpreting signals from your body and your environment. That brings me to the theory of constructed emotion. Based on decades of neuroscience research, Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett, who's a neuroscientist, she developed something called the theory of constructed emotion. It demonstrates that emotions are not hardwired reactions triggered by the amygdala. Instead, emotions are actually predictions your brain constructs in real time. How does it do this? It integrates 4 things. First, interoceptive signals, meaning what is happening inside your body. Then, exteroceptive signals, what is happening in your environment. Remember, the brain is doing this in milliseconds. Then it's also retrieving past experience, past memories, and trying to see the conceptual knowledge and memories. And it is seeing the current context, which is the situational interpretation. So your brain is constantly asking, based on what I'm sensing in my body, what I'm seeing in my environment, and what I've experienced before, what should I feel and do right now? Then it constructs an emotion to match that prediction. So let me elucidate this by giving you an actual workplace example. So it's Monday morning, and as you can see, you open your inbox, and there it is, an email from your boss that just says, "Need to talk. When are you free today?" Now, what happens in your brain? Remember, in milliseconds, body signals, the interoceptive signal, heart races, stomach tightens, shoulders tense up. Scans the environment, which is the exteroceptive signal. All right, I see that there is vague subject line, no context, and it's sent early Monday morning. Then it tries to retrieve the past experience, past memories. Last time boss sent "need to talk," I actually got reprimanded. And then it looks at the current context. Well, I pushed back in Friday's meeting, and I'm also quite late in submitting the Q2 report. So what happens? Your brain predicts based on your body activation plus vague email plus bad past experience plus recent tension. What does your brain predict? Threat. I'm in trouble. And therefore, what is the emotion that's constructed? Anxiety. So now you spend the next hour spiraling. Am I getting fired? Did I do something wrong? And then comes 10 a.m., the actual meeting, where you meet your boss and you realize he looks quite chill. And he says to you, I'm nominating you for the leadership development program. Are you interested? Wow. So think about this. Imagine you had the same body signals, same email, but there was a different past experience. Let's say it was a positive past experience. Don't you think the emotion would have been different? It would have been curiosity or excitement instead of anxiety. So the emotion wasn't in the email. Your brain constructed it based on how it interpreted the signals. Now, why is this important? Because with conscious emotional awareness, you can question that construction. Once you bring your prefrontal cortex or you activate your thinking brain, you can question that construction. You can change and feel a different emotion, right? How can you do that? You can tell yourself something like, my brain is predicting threat, but logically, do I actually have enough information yet? Right? So does it make sense for me to be anxious when I don't have the full information? Now, do you notice that here, just by doing this, or just by saying, let me not construct anxiety about something I don't know, the moment you intervene and you do this kind of exercise with yourself, you immediately stop becoming the emotion. Instead, you come out and you become the observer, right? So the moment you activate your thinking brain, you become an observer and you stop becoming the emotion. Do you see the power in that? So also remember.
That is absolutely powerful, Aisha. That is
Yes.
absolutely powerful. And I also question the boss's approach with the email. And he obviously was not being very emotionally intelligent. But
Correct.
that's
Very
absolutely
true.
powerful for how I manage
Yes.
my own emotions in that space. That's powerful.
Yes, I'm so glad you talked about that. Absolutely. And do you see why the leaders need emotional intelligence training as well? Right?
Absolutely.
But in the thought exercise, if you notice, there was a small section that said that it is only for new entrant, new professionals, and not the leaders don't need emotional intelligence, whereas everyone does, right? So moving on, we have to remember
But
that. Yes, sorry.
but could I just suggest that the boss, even if he had sent the same email, but had punctuated it with, I hope you had a great weekend. And,
Exactly.
we are in for a fabulous week. And
Mm,
just added, they said, do you have time today? It would have sent a completely different,
and
message. And,
yeah.
just a few additional lines could have made the world of difference in terms of
Yes.
that employee having to manage so many different emotional constructs in
Yes.
the period of time, receiving the email and actually entering into the meeting with the boss.
Yes, and do you see that that is what is emotional labor? So when you look at emotional labor, in a way, isn't it just about the depletion of emotion? If you really think about it simply, in simple terms, It is the depletion of your energy, right? So when you are having these negative thoughts or negative emotions, it starts really draining you, right?
Yeah.
So emotional intelligence is about being conscious about the other person's energy. And if you cannot uplift it, at least don't deplete it, So be
Yes.
conscious of that as well, you see? So again, now, by becoming the observer and not becoming your emotion, you have to remember that that is actually not suppression. That is conscious construction, correct? Conscious construction of emotions. So talking about amygdala and prefrontal cortex a little bit, because it is, again, a myth that I want to bust. And as I had mentioned in part one, that neuroscience is really taking emotions seriously. And so when something triggers you, your amygdala actually acts like a rapid alarm system. So what amygdala is that it is a rapid alarm system. It scans for threat or uncertainty and activates a fast automatic response. At the same time, when you give it a little pause, you allow your higher brain regions, especially the prefrontal cortex, to step in, to interpret, to evaluate, and to regulate that signal. So emotional intelligence is not emotions versus logic. Let us please be clear about this. It's not emotions versus logic. It is emotions and logic, and it is reactivity versus reflection. So emotional intelligence is about reflection and not reactivity. So when we look at low emotional intelligence and high emotional intelligence, what is taking place here? So alarm system activates the amygdala, and usually we see reaction follows automatically for low emotional intelligent leaders or individuals. Whereas with high emotional intelligence, what's different is that there is the alarm system that activates, but then the prefrontal cortex engages, and then there is evaluation that takes place, and then you choose a response. Remember, I'm mentioning the word response, not react. So the emotion signals that something matters. Like I mentioned earlier, emotions are crucial data, that something matters, that whatever you're feeling, that needs attention. But it is your executive brain that decides what to do about it. So who gives the instruction? If it is not emotions, who should be giving you instruction is your thinking brain. Emotions are data, not instructions. Who gives you the instruction? The thinking brain. So that pause between activation and response, again, is not suppression. It is regulation. And that gap is where conscious leadership lives. And that brings me to the question, what is conscious leadership?
Before we go to conscious leadership, Aisha, I just consider that aspect of the pause to be so powerful. Actually, 71% of the respondents in the survey indicated that they actually have trained themselves to take a moment, whereas 24% indicated that they have not so trained themselves. Sometimes when I remember to, I pause. And it
Yes.
seems to me, as though there are some who are driven by the emotion and not as much by the pause. I wonder if you can probably, suggest maybe one or two ways to assist the 24% to move
Mm-hmm.
to the pause so that they build emotional,
Mm-hmm.
intelligence in these difficult situations, and they're not
Yeah.
led by the emotion, but they're led by their cognitive thinking self.
Yes, for sure, Jerry. So even I took note of that answer. And so when they say that, sometimes I don't even remember to pause. That is actually driven by something much more powerful. It is driven by the notion about leadership itself. It is, so what I mean by that is, when you are in a leadership position, you sort of believe in this narrative that you need to have answers with you. You need to be able to give answers right away. So if someone asks, if someone is sharing something, they feel like they have to jump in. If they take that pause, then it may come across as that, okay, I'm thinking and I'm not sure, so it is about them worrying about their credibility in some way. However, for those individuals who mentioned that they sometimes forget to pause, though I know where you're coming from, I also want to tell you that isn't it better if you take that pause, and when you answer, that answer has weight, it has substance, rather than just filling up the gap or filling up, the silence, So I think that is a deeper question that you need to ask yourself.
And it's not a pause, like a deep breath. Let
Yes,
me
yes, yes.
let me compose myself before I answer
Yeah,
you. It's not that kind of pause. It is more strategic, focused
yes,
pause that gives opportunity for you to be in
yeah.
control of your emotions more so than your emotions being in control of you. Because I know that sometimes the pause is people taking that deep
Mm,
breath, and you could see the
mm.
emotions all over them. They wish they can answer a particular way, but look,
Yeah,
let me
yeah,
take a
yeah.
pause and before I tell you something
Mhm.
that I shouldn't say to
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. And again, if you remember from part one, I had mentioned about vulnerability, right? As leaders, to be okay to express your vulnerability. Today, conscious leaders, remember I mentioned about Satya Nadella, right? What did he do? Microsoft, the CEO of Microsoft, what did he do? He showed his vulnerability, right? He was not afraid to show his vulnerability because, in essence, he was being honest, because no one has all the answers at all times. That is why we have an entire team. We have brilliant minds working together. It's like these different fingers, right? Each one is different, but together it becomes powerful, right? So
Yeah.
so yes, I mean, again, it ties back to conscious leadership, and that is why today I wanted to take a moment to, to expand on conscious leadership using emotional intelligence. Yeah. So
Yes.
yes, so to answer what is conscious leadership, it is actually the practice of leading from awareness rather than autopilot. So again, Jerry, the same question about the individual forgetting to pause. It is on autopilot.
Yeah.
But taking that pause is through awareness. But autopilot is, I always do that. So now this is how I am, and now I need to keep, that behavior continues. So you go back, you regress to your habitual patterns. That is what we are trying to disrupt and intervene and transform from becoming just a leader to a conscious leader, right? So again, it ties back to reflection versus reaction. So it is also about making deliberate choices. Very important. We have to understand this. Conscious leadership is making deliberate choices about how you show up, how you respond, and how you influence, rather than defaulting to habitual patterns, right? So I will be elaborating further on this. So again, as you saw, that it is the difference is awareness versus autopilot, right? So unconscious leaders, what are they doing? They are operating on autopilot, reacting from past conditioning, and being driven by unexamined beliefs. Again, that goes to show that we need to examine our beliefs. We need to do a check on our belief systems every single day. We cannot just go from one day to another and on autopilot. So that emotional intelligence helps you to be mindful of your belief systems, your habits, and the conditioning that you have gathered over the years. So conscious leaders, on the other hand, they lead with self-awareness, intentionality. They set intentions and presence in each moment. So there is conscious presence. They're not just there physically, but they're there fully from mind, body, and soul, fully present. That's called the conscious presence. So at its core, conscious leadership asks one question repeatedly. And this is a question we all need to ask ourselves in every moment. Am I responding to what's actually happening right now? Or am I reacting from past experiences, unprocessed emotions, or unconscious patterns? Let me read that once again. Am I responding to what's actually happening right now? So am I fully present here in this moment, at this moment? When I'm listening to someone talking, am I listening fully? Or am I internally reacting from past experiences that could also be internally judging someone? Or you have these unprocessed emotions or unconscious patterns that can also be visible through your body language. Even if you're not saying anything, maybe you're fidgeting, or maybe you have a certain facial expression, right? So it is not just about what you say, it's about your entire presence. So this is a question we need to ask as conscious leaders. So I also need to talk about value system when we are talking about emotional intelligence. So emotional intelligence tells you how to respond effectively, but it is a value system that guides you on what is the right thing to do. So without values, emotional intelligence becomes neutral. It doesn't kind of have a sense of direction, so to speak. But with values, emotional intelligence becomes principled, conscious, and sustainable, ensuring that every response aligns with your ethics and your organizational vision. Now, despite individual differences, certain values are widely shared because they support human well-being, trust, and cooperation. So what are those universal value systems? Integrity and honesty, which is essential for trust. Respect and fairness, which is crucial for collaboration. Compassion and empathy, which is fundamental for social cohesion. And responsibility and accountability, which enables sustainable action. Now, these values become universal because they support functioning societies and effective human relationships. So in workplaces, organizations often formalize these as core values, creating a shared ethical compass for all members. So here's the truth. You cannot be a conscious leader without emotional intelligence. And you cannot develop emotional intelligence without becoming more conscious. So they're not separate concepts. They are two sides of the same practice. So emotional intelligence gives you the competencies, whereas conscious leadership is what happens when you apply those competencies intentionally, moment by moment, in every interaction. So let me show you further how emotional intelligence and conscious leadership connects by talking about the 4 pillars of emotional intelligence, which is actually the foundation of conscious leadership. Now, these 4 pillars will help you understand emotional intelligence in totality. Now, the father of emotional intelligence, Dr. Daniel Goleman, he gave us the 4 pillars of emotional intelligence, and they are self-awareness, which I love to call conscious presence. In the context of conscious leadership, I love to call self-awareness as conscious presence. The second pillar is self-regulation. In the context of conscious leadership, conscious choice. Social awareness or conscious curiosity. And relationship management or conscious connection. Let's look at each of these pillars because, again, it's crucial to help you understand emotional intelligence in totality. So let's start, of course, with pillar 1, which is self-awareness or conscious presence. So what is self-awareness? It is the ability to recognize what you're feeling in real time. And it's not just about recognizing your feelings, it is also about understanding how it influences your decision and behavior based on what you're feeling, right? So unconscious leaders, by now you already know, they operate on autopilot. So imagine this. So they walk into meetings carrying unprocessed stress, frustration, or defensiveness, and don't realize that they are contaminating the room with their emotions. Whereas conscious leaders, before they enter the meeting or before they enter anywhere, they start with self-awareness. What does that look like? Before they enter any conversation or make any decision, they pause. They ground themselves, they pause. Remember about the alignment of body, feelings, and your behavior? So they pause and ask. They do a quick emotion check. What am I feeling right now? What am I bringing into this room emotionally? And is this the version of me I want to lead from? Again, what am I feeling right now? What am I bringing into this room emotionally? And is this the version of me I want to lead from? Think about it. Don't you think you need to do a quick emotional check-in even when you before entering your own home? Right? Anywhere, even if you go to parties or summit or anywhere, public events, right? And as well as your home. It is always great to do this emotional check-in because then you can align yourself and you can enter with, I love to say, grace. So let me elucidate by giving you a workplace scenario. So imagine this. You just got off a tense call with your CFO who rejected your budget proposal. Now you are visibly frustrated, maybe even slightly angry. But you also have a team meeting in another 5 minutes. Now, unconscious leaders who are low in self-awareness, they will walk into the meeting still carrying that frustration. Remember, contaminating the room. So that individual's tone is sharp and body language is closed. So when someone presents an idea, that the unconscious leader immediately begins pointing out flaws. And this is when the team notices and realizes that, all right, this person, of course, is not in a good mood. And so it just doesn't make sense to even share our ideas, because that individual, the unconscious leader, is not even present in the room, right? Whereas conscious leaders, as you can already predict, with high self-awareness, they pause. So if, let's say, you are the conscious leader, what would you do? You would pause before the meeting. You would notice, do an emotional check-in. I am frustrated. I'm still processing the budget rejection, and I am feeling defensive. Now you have two choices. You either tell your team members, I will need another 10 minutes if that's okay. Can we please push the meeting so, I can give you my full attention? Or you tell yourself, I'm aware I'm carrying some frustration from another conversation. Let me set that aside so I can be fully present here. Some people are good at compartmentalizing their thoughts and feelings. So the shift is from unconsciously infecting the room with your emotions to consciously managing your presence. Now you see why self-awareness is recognizing your emotions, understanding them, and also paying attention to how it can influence your behavior and the environment around you. So self-awareness is the foundation of conscious leadership. You can't lead intentionally if you don't know what you're feeling. Now, pillar 2 is self-regulation, which I love to call conscious choice. This is the ability to manage your emotional responses so they serve your goals rather than derail them or jeopardize them. So in essence, what we did earlier, where we corrected where we took time and we regulated ourselves, that itself is part of self-regulation, right? So self-awareness and self-regulation going hand in hand, right? So unconscious leaders, again, will react. For example, something triggers them. Let's say a challenge, a criticism, a mistake, and they react immediately from that triggered state. But conscious leaders, what do? Do they react or do they respond? They respond, meaning they think and then act. So they feel the emotion, but they don't become the emotion, as I mentioned earlier. They create a gap. So we're talking about self-regulation here, right? Conscious choice. So you're consciously deciding to create a gap between the stimulus and your response. And in that gap, they make a conscious choice. Workplace scenario for this is, imagine you are in a leadership meeting and a peer publicly challenges your strategy. Now you feel defensive at this moment. So unconscious leaders who have low self-regulation, what is happening? Amygdala fires, immediate reaction. They immediately go into defense mode and they say something like, that won't work because blah, blah, blah. Now, your goal actually shifts from solving the problem to now protecting your credibility. Now, you are the unconscious leader is, I wouldn't say you are, I would say unconscious leader is in clearly a fight mode. Conscious leaders who have high self-regulation, amygdala fires, prefrontal cortex or the thinking brain engages, and they respond. Now, when in that pause, again, it's happening in milliseconds, you are asking yourself, this is the dialogue you're having internally. What is this defensiveness telling me? What I'm feeling? I'm feeling defensive. What is this trying to tell me? It is trying to tell me that I care about this but I'm also feeling exposed. But what is my actual goal here? Remember the actual goal. Always remind yourself of the larger goal. What is that larger goal? Because if you jeopardize that goal, that is when you regret your decision, correct? So that is when you remind your larger goal and you ask yourself, but what is my actual goal here? To be right or to get the best solution? Now by then, because your prefrontal cortex is already engaged, you can already start feeling calmer. And then you respond, that's a fair concern. Can you please walk me through your thinking? I want to make sure I'm not missing something. Now, this is something I tell everyone. Have these kind of sentences in your toolkit. Do prime yourself before going into the meeting by telling yourself, I'm going to the meeting, I'm doing the presentation, and the larger goal here is to determine what is best for the company. And so when anyone questions, that means it is not an attack to me, it is a brainstorming session. The moment you prime yourself by thinking that before you enter the meeting, so when someone does ask a question, it will not come across as a threat. So again, here you're shifting from unconscious reaction to conscious response. So self-regulation simply is how conscious leaders stay grounded under pressure. It is the pause that turns impulse into intention. Now, pillar 3 is social awareness. So you have self-awareness and self-regulation, which is internal, and now it is external. Remember, harmony with yourself and harmony with others. So social awareness, also called conscious curiosity. So it is the ability to accurately perceive what others are feeling and what's happening in the group dynamic. Now, unconscious leaders usually miss the signals. Not because, now see, we humans have evolved to read body languages, right? Because communication is not just the words you speak. It is primarily the body language, the facial expressions, the tone of the voice. So though we have evolved to detect that, the reason why unconscious leaders miss those signals is because they're so focused on their own agenda, their own stress, and their own thoughts that they end up missing the signals. Doesn't that also show that to become socially aware, you first need to master or to take care of the first and the second pillars, which is self-awareness and self-regulation? Only then can you be in a calmer state to be able to notice the signals around you. If you don't do that, you will also miss all the signals that's happening in your environment. So in this case, the unconscious leader they are not noticing the team member who has gone quiet. A team member who used to provide really productive ideas has now gone quiet. But the unconscious leader did not notice that. The unconscious leader did not even notice the energy shift in the room after they spoke. Didn't notice the unspoken tension between two people. And did not notice the body language that says, I don't agree. So conscious leaders, they stay attuned. So you already know when you have high self-awareness, high self-regulation, automatically you also have higher social awareness. So you are attuned to the environment around you. So they're able to read the room. They notice what is not being said, and they're curious instead of assuming. So a workplace scenario to elucidate this further is where, imagine you're presenting a new initiative and you ask your team members, any questions? And then there is silence. Now, an unconscious leader who has low social awareness, they assume, great, everyone seems to be on board, meetings adjourned. But what is actually happening here? One person is confused but doesn't want to look incompetent. Another disagrees but thinks it's futile to speak up. And third has a better idea, but the tone didn't invite it. Whereas conscious leaders with high social awareness, they notice the silence, they notice the body language, such as crossed arms, averted eyes, or forced nods. And then they pause and then they say, I am noticing we haven't heard from everyone, and I'm sensing some hesitation here. Before we move forward, I want to make sure we surface any concerns or questions, even the uncomfortable ones. So please feel free to share what you think. Now, you see the shift from unconscious assumption, which is silence equals agreement, to conscious curiosity. What is really happening here? So social awareness is how conscious leaders create psychological safety. Here is where psychological safety comes in. They see what others are feeling and make space for it. And that brings me to the fourth pillar, which is relationship management, or what I love to call conscious connection. This is the ability to build and maintain relationships. So it's not just building, but it's also maintaining relationships that enable collaboration, resolve conflict, and inspire commitment. So unconscious leaders, how do they look at relationships? They look at relationships as nothing but transaction. Relationship is all about transaction. That is what they think. Every conversation is about the task. Every one-on-one is nothing but just a status update. And they see people as human doings rather than human beings. But it is the conscious leaders who genuinely connect. They understand that trust, loyalty, and performance are built in moments of genuine human connection, not just task completion. So let me give you a workplace scenario for this. Imagine an employee comes to you and looks visibly anxious and says, I'm overwhelmed. The deadlines keep changing and I don't even know what's expected of me anymore. Now, the unconscious leader, low in relationship management. They will jump straight to problem solving. Okay, let me clarify the priorities. Here's what needs to happen first, second, third. Does that help? But what just happened here? The unconscious leader completely skipped the emotion. They treated them like a task to be managed, not a person to be supported. And because of that, the stress in the team member continues to stay high because they don't feel heard. Right? So conscious leaders, on the other hand, they pause and they validate the emotion first. Remember, when a team member comes to you and shows his or her vulnerability, that means they are choosing to trust you. It is not, everyone wants to look and feel professional, but when they actually shows their vulnerable self, as a leader, don't you think you need to respect that? And to respect that, the first thing you need to do is not to think about the problem solving anymore. The first thing is to validate their emotions. So you say something like, that sounds really frustrating. Of course, you need to sound genuine, right? So that sounds really frustrating, especially when you're trying to do good work and the goalposts keep moving. I can see how that would make you feel overwhelmed. So when you validate, they will share more, and you actively listen to what they have to express. Then, only then, will they be ready to even think about the solution. Because remember, the emotions, it's actually going, it's happening, there's a chemical cascade that's taking place. Intense emotions. So their prefrontal cortex is not ready at that moment. It has not engaged to start listening to your solution. Only when you see that they have calmed down, then you can say, tell me more. What's been the most confusing part? Again, you are supporting the individual. What's been the most confusing part? And what would you feel clearer about? About what would help you to feel clearer about what's expected? So the shift here is from unconscious task management to conscious relationship building. We need to give it that time and effort. If you want to be a great leader, you need to invest that time and energy to build, maintain the relationship. So relationship management, in simple terms, is how conscious leaders, basically relationship management helps conscious leaders to scale trust, one validated emotion, one genuine moment of presence at a time. So moving on, I want to take this opportunity to talk about one aspect of neuroscience of emotional intelligence, basically about how your brain creates and can transcend emotional reactivity. Now, the reason why I have included this in the presentation is because, as you saw, emotional and intelligence, it's your cognitive brain, your thinking brain that you need to activate. And when you come across scientific facts, it helps you to further regulate your emotions, because these scientific facts empower you at that moment in time when you need to regulate your emotions in real time, right? So this brings me to 90-second principle by Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor, who is a Harvard-trained neuroanatomist. So she made a profound discovery. She discovered that when an emotion is triggered, in any intense emotion, let's look at anger in this case, because that is the most, it has the most detrimental consequence. So imagine you feel an intense anger. So emotion is triggered in your brain. Now, what happens in that moment? There is a chemical cascade that takes place. We've all felt that, haven't we? The clenched fist and the breathing gets faster. We feel the heat, right? All of that. What if I told you and equip you? I want to equip you today with a scientific fact that any intense emotion only lasts for 90 seconds. It goes up, the anger peaks, and then it subsides, dissipates naturally. That's it, just 90 seconds from trigger to dissipation, but only if you don't feed it with your thoughts. So if just naturally, if you let nature take its course, it'll subside in just 90 seconds. Now, here's what's happening in your brain in those 90 seconds. 0 to 2 seconds, something happens, a comment, an email, a perceived slight. Your amygdala, which is the brain's threat detection center, fires instantly. And then between 2 to 90 seconds, your amygdala releases stress hormones. That's what you're feeling inside, the cortisol and adrenaline into your bloodstream, right? So in the hunter-gatherer days, these hormones helped us to run, right? Flight or fight. But of course, we don't live in that era now. So your body responds at that moment, and you're feeling the heart rate increase, your muscles tense up, and your focus narrows. This is the emotion physically moving through your body. It is after the 90 seconds where it is the critical choice point. If you observe the emotion, again, remember, don't become the emotion. You observe. You tell yourself, okay, I'm feeling anger. I can feel your clenched fist, right? So when you remember in part one, I'd mentioned about even labeling your emotions. So you're telling yourself, okay, I'm feeling angry. You're trying to name it. Why? Because you're trying to actually immediately turn on the thinking brain. Because if you don't, then you become the emotion. So the key point whenever you feel intense emotion is try and turn on your thinking brain, whether that's by labeling your emotions, or maybe you look away or something and think about something else. So I don't know what works for you, but the key point is activate your prefrontal cortex. So you observe the emotion without feeding it, right? And it naturally dissipates. But if you engage with it mentally, such as replaying the trigger, maybe even justifying your reaction or building a story about it, around it, you re-trigger the amygdala and the 90-second cycle starts again. Now, why does this matter for leaders? Most people don't experience a 90-second emotion. They experience a 90-minute, 90-day, or even a 90-month emotion because they keep re-triggering it with their thoughts, right? So leaders with low emotional intelligence react within the first 90 seconds and keep the emotion alive for hours or days through rumination. But leaders with high emotional intelligence, they recognize the emotion, allow the 90 seconds to pass without reacting, and then choose their response from a calm, clear state. So that 90-second pause is the difference between reactive leadership and conscious leadership. So today, remember that you know better. You know now that it just takes 90 seconds. Just give yourself 90 seconds. And that brings me to the last part of today's webinar, the Monday morning model. So why Monday morning? Monday morning is when you set the emotional tone for your entire week. Because how you show up on Monday, the energy you bring, the presence you embody, the language you use, ripples through every interaction, every meeting, and decision for the next 5 days. But unfortunately, most leaders start Monday in reaction mode. They dive straight into emails. They've already stressed before the first meeting, and they're operating on autopilot by 9 a.m. Emotional intelligent leaders start Monday with intention. Remember conscious presence. They ground themselves first. They set the tone deliberately. They become the anchor their team needs. That's what Monday morning model is all about. And this is where I have given the acronym ANCHOR. Anchor yourself. So this is an actionable tool you can start doing from Monday itself. A stands for attune to yourself. Before you open your laptop, sit quietly for at least 5 minutes and check your mind. What's on my mind as I enter this week? Do I have strategy concerns? Do I have tough decisions or something that's worrying me, or some tough conversations that I need to have? Then you check your body. How does my body feel? Is it rested? Is it tensed? Is it energized? Or is it depleted? Then you check your emotion. What emotion am I carrying into Monday? Is it optimistic? Is it anxious? Is it overwhelmed or grounded? So set your intention for the week. This week, I commit to leading from presence, not pressure. When I feel myself drifting, I return to my anchor. N stands for notice the room. You set the tone for psychological safety. Remember in part 1, I mentioned that your emotional state is actually the real working environment for your team members. So in your first team interaction on Monday, whether it's a stand-up or a one-on-one or a leadership meeting, you intentionally notice who speaks first, who stays silent, what's the energy like? Is it engaged, or is it guarded, or is it tired? Then you lead with curiosity. Instead of diving straight into the agenda, start with, before we jump in, let's do a quick pulse check. On a scale of 1 to 10, how are you feeling about the week ahead? Anyone wants to share? So if you start Monday by noticing and acknowledging what's real, such as stress, excitement, exhaustion, uncertainty, your team learns. I can be honest here. I don't have to pretend. So that's psychological safety built in the first 5 minutes of Monday morning. Next, choose your response. So here, it's a reminder to create the 90-second habit. Make a commitment for the week. This week, every time I feel triggered, before I respond, I will pause for 90 seconds. Write this on a post-it if you require and place it where you can see it clearly. Feel, when you feel, you pause for 90 seconds, you choose, you respond. So the first time you pause on Monday, it becomes easier to pause on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So Monday is where you install the operating system for your week. Next, H stands for humanize the language you use. Words build worlds. Remember, words build worlds. So choose one dehumanizing phrase you'll consciously replace this week. For example, this week, I will say our team instead of resources. This week, I will say, how can I support you instead of what is the status update? This week, I will humanize my language. So even when I'm sending an email to my HR, I will be conscious enough to replace the word workforce to human force. Look at the power of that shift. Instead of saying workforce, just by changing it to human force, naturally you start looking at your team members as humans and not workers. Change even the term team members to contributors. So now your team members become contributors. They are contributing their ideas, they're contributing their time, they're contributing their energy, right? So you become conscious just by changing the language. And also burnout. What if we stop calling it burnout? Instead, we say systemic overload. Because when you say burnout, doesn't that mean that it is insinuating that it is the individual's fault, that the individual was not able to manage their time properly or resource properly, and therefore the person got burnt out? The moment you say systemic overload, now the issue is not in the person. It is the problem lies in the system itself. So you see the power just by changing the language. So in your first Monday message to your team, also, instead of saying, let's have a productive week, and then start, listing out the week's priorities, try saying something like, good morning. I hope everyone had a restful weekend. This week, we're focusing on X, Y, and Z priorities. And remember, I'm here to support however I can. What do you need from me? So please feel free to share what you need from me to make this a good week. So remember, if you lead with humanity on Monday, your team feels the permission to be human all week. O stands for be open to uncertainty. I already mentioned in part 1, please stop performing certainty. If there is any uncertainty going into the week, acknowledge it Monday morning. So instead of saying, here's the plan for the week, let's execute. So that presupposes that you have all the answers and they are just there to basically do the work that you ask them to do. Instead of that, be honest and say, let me walk you through where we are headed this week. We are focusing on X, Y, and Z key priorities. Here's what I'm still trying to figure out. And then you mention the specific uncertainty. Then, if you have thoughts on this, I would love to hear. Please share what else should be on our radar. So by doing this, you're showing your thinking process, which invites collaboration and acknowledges learning in real time. So openness on Monday equals to trust all week. And finally, R stands for repair. Monday should be your repair day. That is what cements psychological safety. So if something broke down last week, let's say you sent a harsh email, a missed commitment, a tense moment happened, repair it Monday morning if you haven't repaired it already, because you should not carry broken trust into the new week. So let's say last week you were short with someone in a Friday afternoon meeting, right? So Monday morning, you either send a message or better still, you pull them aside and you say, I've been thinking about Friday and my tone wasn't okay. You didn't deserve that. I was stressed about the deadline, but that is definitely not an excuse. I wanted to acknowledge that, and I will definitely try to do better this week. Teams that repair quickly are teams that perform at the highest level. So we opened part 1 with a question every leader is sitting with. How do I lead when I don't know what's coming next? Here's what we discovered together. You don't lead through uncertainty by having all the answers. You lead through uncertainty by becoming the anchor. So here's the equation that changes everything. IQ plus technical skills is already the baseline. And who's handling this? AI is already handling this. But when it comes to emotional intelligence and psychological safety, this is your new managerial advantage. And only you can create this. So here's my invitation to all of you. This Monday morning, before you check your email, before you start your first meeting, you run your anchor. Attune to yourself, notice your team, choose your response, humanize your language, be open to uncertainty, restore what's broken. Because leadership through uncertainty isn't transformed in a moment. It's transformed in 1,000 Monday mornings, in 1,000 conscious choices, in 1,000 pauses between trigger and response. Remember, the world doesn't need more leaders with all the answers. It needs more leaders who can stay grounded when no one has the answers. Thank you, everyone, for your conscious presence, and thank you for choosing to lead consciously. Jerry, over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you as well, Aisha. I mean, that was quite a load of really amazing guidelines and tools for managing oneself emotionally. And I wonder, I mean, we have exhausted our time, but certainly I know, Terence, if you can, in the last 3 minutes of this discourse, give, a brief perspective. And to you, our audience, we are going to have an open session to, just wrap on this some more. So please don't think that, we have concluded this conversation. We will have an open conversation where we will open our mics. You will open your mics and we can have a conversation and you'll get some more details on that. But Terence, your perspective in the last 5 minutes of this conversation, I'm anxious to get your feedback in that regard. Such excellent information, practical information. Please open your mic,
There's
Terence.
your mic. Your mic.
Thank you. Thank you, Jerry and Aisha. What a mind-expanding presentation. The thoughts, I took some notes, and what struck me the most is the reframe that sounds simple but actually cuts very deep. And that is, uncertainty is not the problem, and reactivity is. So we spend so much of time and energy to eliminate uncertainty with better forecasting, tighter planning, and with better data sets. But what actually destabilizes teams is rarely the unknown itself. It is watching the leader visibly unravel in the presence of uncertainty. So when a leader reacts from the first surge of emotion, they don't just affect that one conversation. They set the emotional temperature for everyone in the room, often without realizing it. And that is an underappreciated form of leadership risk. The next thing which I want to point out and sit with is the silence point, because I think it is more provocative than it first appears. So we tend to treat silence as an absence where nothing is being said and therefore nothing is happening. But silence in a group setting is often the loudest signal in the room.
True.
It can mean confusion, it can mean disagreement, a fear of judgment, or simply that the environment hasn't yet learned or earned honesty. So the question is, what are we not saying? And maybe that is one of the most important questions a leader can learn to ask. And then Aayusha's point about language. And this presentation argued that culture is not built through mission statements. It is built through thousands of small word choices that were in emails and meetings and your hallway conversations. That is worth taking seriously. If the words we use, like systemic overload instead of burnout, if the words we use are cognitive frames that shape how people see themselves and their role, then vocabulary is not a communication issue, it's a strategic one. Okay, and I'd like to leave with one quote from a celebrated Austrian psychiatrist who had survived 4 Nazi concentration camps, including Auschwitz. And this psychiatrist, he turned into a psychiatrist later. His name is Viktor Frankl. So Viktor Frankl said, between the stimulus and the response is a space. In that space is our power to choose the response. So everything that we have discussed today lives in that space. And the question is, are we conscious enough to use it wisely? Thank you, Aayusha, and all the best to our participants in the audience today.
Yes, thank you so very much, Terence. I mean, there's so much to unpack in this, and we don't have time to unpack it. But as I said earlier, we will have that open conversation. And to close this session, two things, resonated very strongly with me. The importance of a value system. The value system plays such a vital role in driving, who I am as an emotionally intelligent individual. And, at the outset, you spoke about the past actually informing the present. And that requires a measure of discipline. If we can only discipline ourselves to eradicate the past uh, to the point that it does not interfere with the future, we could probably be such, better human beings. And does this mean that we forget the past and forget, the issues? No, it does not. It just means that we are managing the moment. And I close with this quote, one of my personal quotes. I write a lot. There is no time like the present, for in it resides the opportunity for positive influence and change. It is simple but profound. Every moment that I have available to me is a moment to be an agent of change. And the question that we must walk away from this conversation with this morning is, am I using my moments to be a positive influence of change? Am I emotionally intelligent to understand the dynamic of the moment and use the moment to advance the cause of that greater goal, to use the moment to be a human being and not to drive persons as human doings? Thank you so very much for being with us this morning in this conversation. We know we are over time. We had slotted an hour and a half, and we know we are over time by about 10 minutes or so. And we want to encourage you to look out for the open session, which will not be recorded. It will just be an open session. And we invite you to be a part of that. Thank you so very much. I'm Jerry Blenman from the Caribbean Center for Organizational Excellence. It's been a joy to have Aayusha Shrestha sharing with us, as well as Terence D. And to you, our audience, thank you so very much for remaining with us. Have yourselves a wonderful day. Take care now.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jerry.
You're welcome. Thank you.